no one was really building any tools for this space and for designers specifically. And when we started to see that happening, we were like, okay, maybe it's our responsibility. As designers, building something for designers just seemed like it made a lot of sense. I think we've always had a very clear idea of how impactful a solution like this could be. How to get there, that was always a question mark for us.
Welcome to Entrepreneur's Handbook podcast, where we share inspiring startup stories with practical takeaways for you, the listener. Today's guest is Seyi, the CEO and founder of Gravity Sketch. It's an intuitive 3D design platform designed to help teams to review, collaborate, and create in an innovative way. They've raised over 40 million so far after completing their Series A. They count Reebok, Ford, and HP as clients, and are building this every day. I recommend you check out the product because it's really cool what they're doing. And there's even ways that you can get a sample of it for free. Seyi's company is already incredibly successful, and he's really honest about the different hardships he faced along the way and what burdens he overcame and what skills he learned as well. I really love chatting to him, and I'm sure I'm going to talk to him more because there's just so much more I can learn from him, and there's so much you can learn too. Let's get on to the show. Welcome to Entrepreneur's Handbook, Seyi. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Amar.
So you've got a really exciting company out of Gravity Sketch. But what I think the audience really wants to know to begin with is, how did you get started as an entrepreneur? Like, what made you go down this path?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think from entrepreneur in the classic sense, I kind of fell into it. But I would think back to childhood, and I think my family is kind of entrepreneurial in a lot of ways. My stepfather is a barber, and so if anyone knows about that industry, it's very much like you kind of count the heads you cut, and that's what you take home. My mother's she was a substitute teacher for a large portion of our lives, and so she supplemented her income by doing gardening work, and she'd always bring us along with the garden work. So I do understand the value of like hard work, and also like how to make money, additional money beyond just like what your salary is. And I've always had that mindset, but I never really apply that to like, I'm going to found my own company. It's more like you just do what you need to do to get by. And so I kind of fell into this where I came to London to do my master's course, and I met my co-founder, and we were working on this really interesting problem, which was communicating 3D ideas through 2D being a very challenging thing to do. And that was right around the time that immersive reality and these virtual reality headsets, like Mark Zuckerberg bought Oculus, for example. And so we were really gung-ho about this stuff. We never thought that we would actually make a company out of it or go out and kind of raise money and do all this startup journey life. And it really was a factor of no one was really building any tools for this space and for designers specifically. And when we started to see that happening, we were like, okay, maybe it's our responsibility. We did this really great research project. Maybe we got to take it forward and like really provide something for the design community. So as designers, building something for designers just seemed like it made a lot of sense. And that's been a huge whirlwind so far of learning and taking some lumps along the way. And I think the ignorance coming into the space with a lot of ignorance was really helpful for me just to kind of ground myself. But also I think back, and the reason I introduced that kind of story about my parents is I do think back to that often. I do leverage that often of, you know, whether it's raking some leaves for an estate that my mother had a contract with or sweeping hair in the barbershop. It really is about kind of like that service to the customer and that hard work and that figuring out where the opportunities lie. Even if it is a bit of hair on the ground and your dustpan and your broom, you can make a bit of a buck with that. So I think there's a little bit in my DNA, and the rest of it was really out of responsibility for the space that we're working in.
And when you started doing this as a company, like, did you have any idea of where it could eventually head to? Or like, what were your kind of ambitions right at the start when you started getting going?
Yeah, that one I will say was very, very clear. When we were working on it as a research project, it was the future of design, the future of communicating 3D ideas, the future of human connection and communication will be multifaceted, not just audio, video, text, but audio, video, text, spatial, gestural, like that will be the future. And specifically for designers, why work in such a regimented way, in such a controlled environment, being your 30-inch monitor, working directly with your material as you would do in a physical workshop just makes a whole lot of sense. And then you look at all the different designers across the globe and you have a massive opportunity, that rivals the likes of an Adobe or an Autodesk or similar larger organizations. And then we even thought further, and it being a research project, you always want to push your thoughts a bit farther. Well, actually, will 2D artists and designers become 3D artists and designers once these computing platforms become more commonplace and less nascent? And it's very clear that that's going to happen. So we then started seeing this really massive picture where, like, yeah, we're just going to be communicating, sharing, designing, and creating things spatially, like very much natively in the maybe near to midterm future. And in more recent years, we've been seeing very interesting use cases with some of our customers where they're whiteboarding, for example. So not even using it as a firm creation tool, but more as a conversation tool and a true communication platform. And me and my co-founder, we did find it a little bit surprising, but it wasn't completely out of scope from where we were initially thinking about the journey and what we're trying to build. So I think we've always had a very clear idea of how impactful a solution like this could be. How to get there, that was always been the question mark for us.
And when you were trying to gain those initial customers, like right in the early days, how did you get across like this grander vision of where you expect things to go in the future and how to get people on board with that and gain those first paying customers and get the revenue coming in?
Yeah, that's where we took a lot of lumps, to be honest. We essentially were going out and saying this is a product for everyone because everyone needs to communicate spatially, because everyone needs to understand things in 3D from the onset if it is a 3D idea. And we found that, like, when you create a product for everyone, it's kind of creating it for no one at the same time. And I hope I can eat my words one day on that one, but it did feel like that for us. So the messaging was all over the place. We had, kids using it for school projects to car designers using it at some of the most prestigious car companies, right? And so the positioning and how you frame and talk about your product almost had to be bifurcated to each segment that you're talking to. And that was a huge overhead for us, at least from a cognitive perspective. And yeah, we had to learn the hard way. I think we probably spent like 2 to 3 years really trying to work out, okay, actually we need to talk like a professional design tool for industries that really need to bring products to fruition in the physical realm. And that's how we started. And then we even went narrower to think about automotive within the transport bubble. And in more recent terms, in more recent years, we're thinking in terms of like wider. So industrial design, as well as things that may not need to be physical, but have to be 3-dimensional. And that's where you come to media and entertainment.
And I like I said there about the early adopter side as well, because I think, like I said, it's when you've got a technology that is really good and it can make a big difference, and you've got the big vision of where it can transform entire industries in the future. But you've got to get those first people on board to kind of prove the concept and then gain more customers in the future. And I was talking to somebody recently who's looking at gaming with cryptocurrency and saying about how it's a natural fit. And which were these natural fits? He said automotive. And I know you've also done a tour of, was it Oregon, where you're looking at the different footwear companies and sports companies.
Right.
Are these some of the like industries you think you like targeted once you got that product market fit?
Yeah. So in those early years where I said we kind of burned some time trying to figure out like if this is for everyone or a specific subset of people, we learned a lot. And I would actually recommend that people do that. Maybe they just don't spend 3 years doing it, but we learned a lot by just letting everyone get on the platform. And so we started to look at different usages, and we started to understand like, okay, peak usages or usages that were kind of specific towards certain tools that we had, that and where that value could be derived later in the pipeline, in the design pipeline. And we wanted to start at the very top, like the most elite of designers. And I'm not saying this to kind of disenfranchise any other designer, but in terms of all the constraints that need to go into like this product, and I'll focus on the physical realm because that's where we came from. Automotive is really up there. You have human factors, you have safety requirements and regulations, you have the engineering team, and then it has to be sculpturally aesthetic. Like you don't buy an ugly vehicle. At least you don't perceive it to be ugly. So it is subjective in a lot of ways. And if a vehicle was purchased solely on its speed, you would buy an F1. If it was purchased solely on its capacity to move people or objects, you would buy either a massive van or some sort of like minibus, for example. So we are buying these as extensions of our socioeconomic status. And as such, we saw that industry pumps a lot of money into the design of their vehicles. And it is the single most expensive thing you buy in your lifetime outside of your home. And the second you purchase it, it starts depreciating. And so when you look at that and when we kind of put all those pieces together, it made a lot of sense that we start at the very kind of high level and then maybe come down. So let's start where the requirements are very high, very rigid. Let's see if we can understand, and if it could suit those designers, surely it can suit a designer that's making a motorcycle or maybe a bicycle, and then maybe going further down it, maybe into furniture and other things along the path. And we spent about 2 years really cracking that automotive bubble, and then we started looking at wider transportation. And by putting out media on Instagram and a few other platforms, we were able to kind of pull in a few other transportation companies. And so we had the likes of an excavation company that's making these big rigs to kind of remove dirt. They build like whole cockpits in Gravity Sketch. We also had a helicopter company that's building their interiors and testing ergonomics for pilots at the very early sketch level, which is helping them save tons of time in working and physical prototyping. And then somehow it was really peculiar how it all happened, but the community started to kind of gather around footwear. And it was on the back of a footwear designer who actually really was inspired by automotive and transportation design, but somehow he didn't crack that industry and he ended up in footwear design. And I'll never forget, I remember seeing a few of his car sketches and I was like, wow, this guy's really interesting. And all of a sudden I saw him jump into like sketching a shoe on his Instagram page. And I was like, oh, I got to reach out to this guy. So I reached out to him, met in person, and started talking to him about his passion for vehicles and how he saw that this can work with footwear design as well. And then we start just kind of stoke that fire a bit, put some more content out, put his content out, promote him a bit more, tell his story. And there is a little bit of a relationship between footwear and automotive design. If you look at the curves of a shoe and the curves of a car, you can kind of see where those two derive some of the language. But also, it's one of those products that we purchase that's highly predicated on systemic value. And it's one of those things you buy multiple times in your lifetime. And it's a very short product cycle, which is really cool for us because we don't have to wait 6 years to validate our software, because like it takes 6 years for a vehicle to be made, 6 months to 8 months for a shoe to be designed and brought to market. So that was really interesting for us, and we decided to lean into that. And it's been really good so far. We have the top sportswear brands using our product. Most publicly has been Adidas, and they've created some amazing shoes with the tool so far.
Yeah, and like I think it's really interesting as well because, like you said, it's the technology itself is very interesting, but it's more the use cases and like how it can save people time and deliver that real benefit for the companies. And like, let's say there was somebody listening today who's they're designing, they're building a new product, and they would potentially use Gravity Sketch. What would you tell them? How would your sales pitch go in terms of why they should be using Gravity Sketch to design their products?
Oh, this is a good one. On the spot sales pitch. I think it will depend on industry, because I'm very ignorant to other industries, like especially the digital realm. I'm very ignorant to like game design and CGI and kind of the whole digital space. Like if you're making characters for a film or something like this. So I often just probe around the pain, and then I talk through like what are some of the challenges that an immersive environment could offer or could solve. So I will pick the more difficult one, because that's probably more what I've been focusing on recently. But I would say, hey, look, do you ever have this challenge where you're working with teams that are producing most of the concepts in 2D, and at some point you need to make a commitment and jump into 3D, and those tools are a little bit more bloated. They're a little bit more focused for execution and output, and it feels like you have an abrupt gap between the ideation and exploration phase and the execution phase. And we're wedging ourselves right in the middle there, where we hopefully can continue those conversations that are rather ambiguous on the page in the 3D space before firmly committing into the 3D space. And if that is something of interest, I'd love to like talk through your workflow a bit and really understand how that current process is being delivered, and see if there's something that we can experiment with or trial or explore together. And so that's really my completely open, I'm a student, let me learn from you. On the other side, when we're looking at automotive design, it's very clear that you have a very set amount of time to deliver this product. Your designers are working on one view at a time. You may only get 6 views, and you then have to produce something in 3D. The clock is ticking. what we're able to allow you to do is get directly into 3D and have early conversations with designers, engineers, marketing people, and really understand what the ramifications of this design is at sketch by or stroke by stroke phase of the design journey, which could save you tons of time downstream. And we've proven it with a few customers already. Love to tell you some success stories along that line of thinking. So I think like those are kind of the ways I would go about it. A little bit on the spot, but yeah, I would prepare myself a little bit for the customer as well, and like understand where they're at from a business perspective and what are some of their top line goals, like from a carbon footprint and from the design language and how they want their customers to perceive them as a brand.
Yeah, I was just trying to get at for the people listening today, just get a bit of a better idea of like how this gravity sketch works and how it makes such an impact. And like when you said you had those couple of years where you were trying to discover like where to focus on the most, how is it also in terms of creating your business model? How did you come to grips with that about like how you could make this a sustainable business? What kind of modeling do you use there?
Yeah, not a whole lot of science there either. I feel like we're designers. My co-founder and I are designers, right? So experimentation, trial and error is a big thing. I think everyone's wrapped it up into the phrase design thinking, but it's pretty much experimentation, trialing, but moving upwards. I always call it falling up the stairs. I say this to my team all the time. Like, we're going to make tons of failures along the journey, but as long as we're falling up the stairs and not falling down the stairs, I think we're in good shape. And so when it came to pricing and packaging, initially as a startup, it was just three of us. We brought in another co-founder for the more technical side of things. And we're like, okay, we have to prove before we raise money that someone will pay for it, right? Like, we can't just say people will pay for it and here's the problems. And you're requiring a lot from the investor or anyone that's going to believe in your vision, even like future employees that are going to join you. You're requiring a lot of them to like map the journey to their personal understanding of the value. And if I'm honest, and I'm not to be facetious or not to be rude, but the chances of you understanding how your chair that you're sitting in right now is designed and fabricated is pretty slim, right? And I'll go even further. And again, I'm not to poke too much, but your shampoo bottle in your shower, like that goes through a design process that's 3-dimensional, and like you have very little understanding of it. So for us to imagine that our investors are going to have a fully intrinsic understanding of how these things are brought to market and the challenges and the costs associated with that process of bringing them to market, I think it's quite presumptuous. So we decided to at least have some sort of token amount. And we did that through a PayPal link on our website where we said, hey, we're not going to price it. We're going to ask for donation. And that way we don't log any revenue, so that, because people want to do multiples of revenue when they value your business and stuff like this. So it was an interesting one. And I'm a big fan of advisors. So this isn't anything like I'm a genius or anything like this. I talked to a lot of advisors, and like I talked to other founders, and this is the early days. I knew nothing about the startup world. So I was always trying to just understand what it is what is the Rubik's Cube that we need to solve. And so we were able to clear about 10 grand in 1 month. And I think it was roughly like $25 or 25 pounds, I think at the time, to purchase a beta seed or a donation for a beta access. And then we used that as the framing for raising our pre-seed money. We then decided to continue that because it was nice to have a little bit of money, and it was kind of supplementing some of other things that we were doing. But it started to hurt us quite quickly because we knew that we wanted to go B to C to B to B. And that B2C component having a value attached to it was really disruptive for the B2B conversations. Is like, is this worth 25 pounds or is this worth 10,000 pounds? Like, where's the, and how are you justifying that? Where's the justification in that? And that process was really rough for us. Eventually we went free, and that made a whole lot of sense. We essentially were able to say, hey, look, use it as free for as long as you can. There's obviously your own IP concerns and security concerns you might have alongside of that. If you want to talk to the enterprise, we're happy to go on that route. And the way that we priced it was also quite strategic. We looked at some of the other softwares they purchase in the market that most of the automotive industry purchases and uses for the 3D work, as well as their Adobe licenses, because almost everyone's using Photoshop and so forth. And we tried to find like a happy medium. What we found was like some of these larger, more aggressive engineering tools were like 35 grand a seat, for example. And then you had a 20% maintenance fee associated with that. And I won't kind of disclose too much on the kind of Photoshop side of things, but I was quite surprised. Like the sticker that you get online is completely different than the enterprise sticker. So we tried to find a happy medium, and we tried to look at like, we're going to be a subscription based product. So let's look at that maintenance fee that they're paying for some of these other softwares, and let's like price it right along the maintenance fee or a little bit less than the maintenance fee, and like really position it in that way. And the automotive industry at the time was just getting used to purchasing SaaS products. So it was also a conversation around like trying to introduce SaaS and cloud to these very, I would say, kind of slow moving giants. And so that was also a process of like a little bit of a dance back and forth. I still don't think we've cracked pricing, to be honest. I think there's still a lot of room that we can grow there and learn. We also have reviewers and viewer seats that we're still experimenting with what they look and feel like from a pricing and packaging perspective. And I feel like potentially a business we always have to maybe review our pricing and packaging, especially as we build our executive team. I mean, we're still pretty early in our journey. So I wouldn't say we've nailed it, but we have something that's working and that's gotten us pretty far in our journey so far.
You mentioned a few different interesting things there, so I'm going to come back to them in turn in a moment. But one thing I find interesting as well is that because you and your original co-founder were both designers, that's often different, right? Because you hear the stereotypical founding team is often programmers or developers or people in that kind of techie side. But you look at Airbnb, for example, that was designers as well who built that. And like, what advantage do you think coming from a design background has helped you in the business sense as well?
Yeah, well, I talked about ignorance, and I think ignorance is really interesting. Ignorance and scarcity are things that, if used properly, can be extremely good tools that you bring forward into business. And the reason I say that is we didn't come with any preconceived notions of what a business should look and feel like. We really had to build it and design the business, not just design the product. And when you're doing things like that, I can't speak to Airbnb. I don't know exactly how they've done it, but you can tell that the business has been designed as well as the product. And I don't want to call it any other companies, but it's very clear that you can see certain companies where the product is designed and they're putting in play a pretty standard playbook that is able to scale that product, which is great, but it maybe doesn't bring that soul to the product. So that ignorance and that scarcity really encouraged us to focus on how to build a business and design a business and learn from the ground up, and also be very vulnerable, be very kind of student in a lot of ways. And then the scarcity was like, how do we actually sell this product? And that beta example I gave you, that built our community. And so we were like, all right, cool. We had that scarcity mindset, and we had to, put some numbers up, but also those people that donated to us in the early days, those are our early adopters, and we really covet those folks, and we support them as best we can, but they also support us. They're our marketing channel. They're our sales channel. They test our product. They give us ideas on roadmap. And so we built this really nice, healthy community that is growing and expanding, and it feels very genuine. And I feel like that is really where the advantage is from coming at it from this design perspective, because designers do user research, designers spend time experimenting a lot, rather than coming at it from maybe a more financial background or a programmer background. Not to say that programmers don't experiment, and we have plenty of programmers and developers in our company that experiment like crazy. I just feel like because designers may not have the deep, rich technical skills to execute the full holistic product, we tend to rely on our experimentation and our prototyping to govern the decisions that we make and to build conviction, as opposed to relying on hardcore facts and results, because we don't have that luxury. I don't know if that makes sense. I know it's a bit of a word mine that I just dropped in there, but I do feel like there's something there around that scarcity component and the ignorance that has driven us to make some really good decisions and also learn really fast.
What I was going to follow up with there is about the community side of things, because like as you said, when you first launched, you straight away got a few hundred customers to get to that 10K per month. And how did you attract those first people, like coming from zero? Where did these initial customers come from? How did you build those like hardcore community people?
Well, it's really helpful to be the customer yourself. So to be the person like that wants to use the product that you're building, that's really nice. And to know what the product needs to some degree. I know it to a limit. But essentially, we were both designers at Jaguar Land Rover interior design team. So we were designing interiors. So we knew kind of the struggles and pains of interior designers. And so we also knew where they go for their inspiration and where they go to commune with each other and to share ideas. And so we just embedded ourselves into different threads and different Instagram pages and different Twitter threads or different Twitter feeds, and start having conversations, real frank conversations about, what does a tool like this, what could it do? What does it look like? How does it feel? And then really going into the DMs and just having conversations and building up an understanding of how to communicate to a wider audience, to understand the value against the problems that we're solving. Just because you work at, Jaguar or Land Rover doesn't mean you understand the pain points of Ferrari, for example. And so really trying to understand and map that out. So we spent a lot of time doing that. And that was how we built up, I would say, empathy. Designers are by nature, I think, are very empathic folks. And so we built up empathy for what we're trying to build. And also, I think, a lot of respect. People looked at us like, okay, they're actually going to try to build this thing where, you look at the biggest incumbents and they can dump millions and millions and still not crack the design bubble. There is no 3D design tool. There's always these 3D technical tools that designers adopt. In fact, I would even go as far, and not to throw Adobe under the bus, but I don't really consider most of their tools designer tools. I think they're very technical tools that designers map themselves to and artists map themselves to because they're very flexible individuals. So here's two folks that are ex-designers that want to build a tool specifically for designers using the latest technology available, and having those honest, open conversations with folks really built a lot of camaraderie. And we still do that to this day. So we still have those conversations. We still approach it in that respect, even from a customer success layer. Like, we're building this product together. We're building this future together. This is for you as a designer. This isn't just a tool that we want you to graft your new workflow to.
Yeah, it does. And it's interesting what you said there as well, because it's going where your customers are, right? Rather than trying to guess what they're thinking or feeling. You're having chats with them right from the beginning. And I'm assuming you had those chats with them before you even decided to do the B2C launch. Was it you were just, as you're just doing the product development?
Absolutely. I mean, before we even a single line of code was written, we still have video of like filming a ceramicist turn a pot, for example, and understanding why the materiality was so important. And that was one of our basic design principles, was immediacy. The fact that immediate imprint of that person's tool or hands are on the material was the feedback that they needed in order to build conviction in the design direction. So that was one of our clear things. And the physicality, being able to touch your creation or get as close to touching your creation, that was another pillar of our design strategy. And then finally, a simple set of rules. It seemed like everyone was able to understand a quick set of rules and allow them to really express themselves creatively, as opposed to learning every single tool that's needed before even cutting your first piece of wood. So those three things helped govern the product strategy altogether. So we couldn't have built the product without doing any of that upfront user research and kind of community building.
And you said as well, the B2C launch was in part so you could prove to investors and you could prove to other customers that it works and there's value there. And obviously, as we fast forward a bit, that strategy clearly worked out, because you have then gone on to get funding and go through multiple rounds. And like, we had a conversation before where you mentioned about how important it is to you about the investors being the right type of people that you want to work with, and being able to work with you and build the company in the direction that you want to take it, and that you can learn from them. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. I'll also say, like, we had to build conviction for ourselves as well, because like we're leaving our designer jobs at a pretty prestigious automotive company to go and build this thing. And I would say that we're the first investors. And so, we really had to build the conviction that we want to do this. And with that conviction, when you go and present to investors, I feel like you have this invincible shield somehow of like, hey, look, I'm so convicted. I have so much conviction to this that if you don't want to invest in us, that's fine. You're just totally not the right person, or you haven't spent enough time with us. We're going to keep building it. And I think that really resonates with people. It's like, these are people on a mission. When you go into an office and you speak to someone, you sound like you're on a mission, not looking for answers, not looking for a handout. That was the first starting point. But secondly, you also covet the people that you bring into your team a lot more. And your investors are your first teammates, aside from your co-founders. Like those are teammates that you're bringing in at the highest level to help guide you. And as first-time founders, we need folks that are going to buy into the vision and look at this as a long-term play. It's a nascent technology that we're building on top of virtual reality, augmented reality. And it's a space that is going to really demand a lot of change management for a lot of these organizations. So it's a slow burn sale for a lot of these larger organizations. So I really just try to make sure that the person that we're speaking to has done a little bit of research, or at least read the materials that we sent through, has the ambition to really grow into a unicorn status company, because of course we want to make money, but we want to have impact more than anything. We'd love to be the ones that change the model of what design software looks like in the 3D space, or what communication looks like in the 3D space. And those are not very easy to find individuals. A lot of folks will do like what I said, they'll look at a multiple of your revenue and try to value your business in that respect. And I mean, that's one thing, valuation. But the other thing is, like, if you're starting from that point, you're kind of starting from the wrong point. Let's start from the problem. Let's start from the pain points. Let's start from us as founders and what we've been through. And then let's go down that journey together, because these are people that are going to be with us for the rest of our company's lifespan, and hopefully the rest of our professional working lives, so we can continue to tap in with them and build that network. I personally feel like this is the work that is my life's work. After this company, I may go on to do something greater. That'd be awesome. I may go back to being a designer. And so as such, I really value this time that I'm investing in the business right now. And I want to make sure that the people that are investing with us are people that I can grow and learn from, just like our user and our community base. I wouldn't want to have customers that are a headache, for example. Like I'm a very big fan of firing customers if they're not bought into this vision and where we're going, and it's just feature demands all the time. It doesn't make sense for us. So I want to treat everyone the same way, including our investors. It's like, let's find people that really want to go on this journey with us, care about me as a person as well. I mean, investors have told me multiple times when I send emails at like 1, 2 a.m., go get some sleep. So, I'm happy that we've been able to curate this group of people at the board level. And I think it's really important, if you're starting something that you're really passionate about and building, and happy to turn down acquisition offers to continue building, that you bring the right people along that journey with you. If you're looking to just build, exit, and kind of use that to build again, serial entrepreneur style, there's probably a different framework for you. I haven't been down that journey yet. I don't know what that looks like, but I have to work with people I really enjoy working with and care about me, and I care about them.
What are some of the greatest lessons you've learned from some of your investors? Like, where have they helped you or potentially made you pivot in the direction of Gravity Sketch?
The pivot, we haven't been through too many pivots. I think pivoting and thinking has been really important. And that was really around our roles as co-founders and our roles as leaders. And this really an interrogation of how you hire, when you hire, and how you kind of manage your team. In the past, I had this thinking of like, we're trying to build this together as a team, as a family kind of thing. And, I really was encouraged to think more aggressively about, well, you're on a mission, and it's really valuable to almost approach it from the sports mentality, where you're looking at winning at all costs. Well, maybe not at all costs, because you obviously don't want to hurt people, but you're looking at really winning and winning a championship and having this kind of legendary success. And as such, there are going to be people along that journey that come in and come out, and they help you get there. They're very important people along the path, but they may not be with you from start to finish. And I was lucky enough to get that very early on in the journey, and really bake that into our culture around, really trying to align the best people next to each other for the stage of company that we're at. And what that does is, I've seen that now. And what that does is it really motivates the top performers to continue to really push the product and push the ideas, and like have the bandwidth to actually impress themselves, have the impression and project themselves onto the mission. And our mission has expanded beyond what I thought was possible based on the type of profiles that we've hired. So, and also based on the fact that we've had to find the right cadence in which to let people move on to the next stage of their journey, as we bring someone in to continue to help progress in the journey in the direction that we're going. I don't know how to succinctly say it, but definitely that is one of the biggest learnings I've had from that kind of investor startup level where you're just thinking about your team, thinking about the company growth, and thinking about like the different growth spurts that you have to go through. It's also the hardest thing, right? Because you really want to see people succeed, but you also need to think about the company as, I think, as like not a family, unless you're doing a lifestyle brand, but more as like this mission and a team that's going to get to that championship.
You said the mission has like increased as you've gone along now. What's the mission today? What's like in the next year or two, what are your ambitions? Where do you want Gravity Sketch to get to?
Yeah, so the next couple of years is really about facilitating better communication, especially around things that have yet to be brought to production, whether it's digital production or physical production. And a lot of people may look at us on our website doesn't do us much justice in that respect, but look at us as a creation tool only. But creativity and creation, these are communication methods in a lot of ways. If we're just doing pure art, okay, art does invoke something, it could communicate something. But with respect to design, the placement of a button, the colors that you choose, these things are communicating certain functionality. And when it comes to pre-production, you're using tools to communicate where words cannot stand up. And so what we want to do as a business and as a vision is really create like text, voice, 3D. These are all communication methods, and bringing those all together, that then gives you a very holistic idea of what actually needs to be brought to market. And if you could do that at the ideation phase, if you could do that at the very early phase, and it can be for a product or it can be for even a concept, like you're looking at. I love the education space because since our product's for free and it's B2C, B2C to B2B, we got a lot of like different use cases, really strange use cases, but we have someone that's doing like molecular structures, for example, and just finding better ways to explain them using 3D and using virtual reality than a whiteboard. And so, that's really the destination that I see in the next 2 to 3 years, is like more use cases where you're just having a conversation directly in 3D. You're leveraging this as opposed to a PowerPoint presentation and multiple video conference calls or physical meetings. And you're kind of getting to the root of what the other person is imagining in 3D much earlier in the journey. So you can have a better, more healthy conversation. And from a product perspective, a lighter carbon footprint. And the long-term vision, we love to be the platform that people build on top of. There's so many things that are three-dimensional and so many conversations that if they're had in 3D, we would get a lot more information from. And so how do we allow people to build applications on top of our solution? And what does that look like, where we have multiple communities that are aligned around the same product or the same platform? That's going to require a few more folks to come on board and a few more rounds of investment. But that vision itself was not generated by myself or co-founders. That was something that our VP of engineering brought in very early doors. And his vision around architecting the product was kind of germinated around the idea that this will be a platform. This will be something that people will map their own creative journeys to, or build applications that other people can jump on and continue using. So, it's really good to give your team a bit of bandwidth to be imaginative. We try to give 20% to really think through, even from the sales team, just to think through where this thing could go, explore different opportunities and bring them to the table.
And what parts are you enjoying the most at the moment, and what do you find the toughest about building Gravity Sketch that you are now? Because obviously you've learned a lot along the way.
I try to turn the tough things into things I love doing. So I was always a visual communicator, and I've had to transition into verbal and written communication. Really, really tough, but I found a way of enjoying it a bit more. I mean, even this interview, if you were to interview me a few years back, I would really struggle to articulate quite a few things. I'm still having a bit of a struggle in some aspects, but it's really hard to change the way you communicate to fit how most people are now used to communicating, right? Like most people, you speak to them, you send them emails, so forth. I was so used to being in the design space where I can just draw images, and a couple of reference images in a mood board tells a huge story for other people consuming, and especially other designers consuming the work that I was doing, that I've had to make this huge leap, almost, full circle, or not full circle, 180, and start doing communication and being proficient in the communication from the verbal and the written aspect. And that's important because you're bringing in people like operations, you're bringing in marketing folks, you're bringing in salespeople, talent people. Like these are all folks that their primary way of communicating is verbal and written. And so you really have to level up on that front. But at the same time, I do enjoy it because I'm trying to find the designer's approach to this, right? And there's been lots of successful creative writers and great speakers. And so diving into this space, and storytellers, for example, diving into the space has been really exciting for me. Looking at like script writing and listening to a lot of oral stories from, folk tales and things like this is quite interesting because you're thinking about what words you can implement into your daily stand-ups that kind of tell a bigger, more imaginative story to folks that may be used to consuming in that way, may not be used to consuming in like the visual mock-up that I can make of what our company vision could be. Then I think there's other elements too around just being a leader and trying to also create like a little bit of flatness in your organization. It's actually really, really hard, especially as you start growing. We're about 75 people now, and we've had to add more layers into the org structure. And I like just running over to someone's desk and talking to them about a problem that we're having without it feeling like this is a direction from the CEO. So I found those kind of casual coffee chats or like, hanging out at someone's desk and having a conversation a little bit harder to have now, because I'm now seeing that the weight of my words is being taken a little bit further than it used to be taken. And so again, that's about refining the way that I communicate. But that's been hard. It's been a really hard one because I find myself drifting a little bit away from some of the really exciting problems that we're facing as a company and intentionally standing back to allow the team to explore those on their own without my input. And it wasn't my input that I want to drive it. It's my input of like, I'm excited about being in that brainstorm moment, but because I'm a CEO, the weight that the perceived weight now that the CEO brings is something that, it's a little bit hard to temper. But I'm hoping to change that. Actually, this is like constantly working on the culture. So hoping to find different ways that I can participate in some of those fun conversations without having it perceived as like a direction or a directive from the top.
Yeah, and like just what you said there about you would find this interview difficult a few years ago, but I feel like during this interview, it's really come across about the way you think about things, and it comes from that design background, I guess, where you're trying to do it in a thoughtful way, right? You're not just trying to get the results; you're trying to do it in the right way. So I think you've been very good at like communicating and articulating that about your thought process and about how you're doing what matters to you with your mission with the company. But also, like you said, like trying to do it in the right way and through the right channels. And also being willing to experiment. And you mentioned to me before about sometimes you need that trust. So from investors to be able to experiment and sometimes spend a lot of money on something, but because the lessons from that are so important. And like, I think that kind of attitude is going to help you when you come to doing storytelling and everything like that in the future and trying to solve the problem with the communication between the different layers of the company, because you've got the methodology you're applying to that is what's going to be effective. And like, it was really great to talk to you today, Seyi, and like, I wish I could chat for more. But if people want to learn more about like Gravity Sketch and about you yourself as well, where should they go to?
Yeah, so to be honest, go to Discord. Like that's where you'll learn most about Gravity Sketch. Our community is probably the best at articulating what we do. Our Instagram as well. And probably look at the hashtag more so than our page, because the people that hashtag our stuff and then the threads that conversations that people are having in the hashtags is pretty incredible. Also, YouTube is another really great channel if you want to learn more about what we're building. I think the website's good. It just gives you like the very, bland information about the business and what we do. But these other platforms really share a window into what's actually happening in the movement that's happening in the design space. For myself, I try to be active on social, but I'm pretty poor at that. That's another thing I need to work on. But I'm more than happy to answer questions on LinkedIn and just look at my name on LinkedIn, and I'm always happy to kind of pay things forward as well. So just reach out, and of course, it might take a little time to get back just based on the workload, but I do try to make it back to almost everyone that reaches out to me. So. Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Amar. It's been great to just chat a little bit about my story, and thanks for the conversation we had before this as well. It was good to learn a little bit about your story.
Yeah, so like we're doing this at the moment from across the Atlantic, but when you're back in London, hopefully we get to meet up in real life.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, we'll definitely meet up. Absolutely.